Hello and welcome, dear viewers. If you've ever underestimated someone because they were quiet, this story might change your mind. She was the camp's medical assistant. No rank, no recognition. Dismissed. Mocked. Nicknamed Nurse Know-It-All. But when a high-risk training simulation spiraled out of control, and real people were in danger, only one person acted. No orders. No spotlight. Just one flawless shot. From the last person anyone expected. What no one knew. She was the daughter of a military legend, and she had been quietly preparing for this moment her entire life. This is the true story of Jasmine Carter, and the day silence spoke louder than rank. Stay with us. Some stories are worth seeing through to the very end. They don't shout, but they stay with you. And if you believe that quiet strength still matters, consider subscribing. Let's begin. Jasmine Carter, 32 years old. Brown hair, slender frame, grey eyes. She arrived at Ridgewell Civilian Training Camp with one simple goal: to apply for the position of medical assistant. The camp was mostly men. Many of them were military veterans. They didn't think much of women in this kind of environment, especially not quiet ones who kept to themselves. Jasmine fit that image exactly. She rarely spoke. She didn't laugh at their jokes or respond to their comments. She cleaned the barracks. She treated cuts and bruises. She maintained the practice rifles. She never talked about where she came from or what she did before this job. Not once. The other trainees had a nickname for her behind her back. The ghost nurse. She moved through the camp like she wasn't really there. Always working, always helping, but never asking for anything. She never asked for recognition, and she never stood in the spotlight. It was a hot afternoon during live-fire training at Ridgewell. The sun had been beating down for hours. Everyone was tired and unfocused. A line of recruits was at the range, rotating through target drills with standard-issue rifles. One of the younger recruits, barely out of high school, looked nervous. His hands shook as he tried to line up his shot. A few of the others behind him chuckled. One of them muttered something about him needing training wheels. He gripped the rifle wrong. When he pulled the trigger, the shot missed completely. The weapon kicked hard, and the barrel slammed backward into his right shoulder. He dropped the rifle immediately and stumbled. Blood spilled from his upper arm almost instantly, fast and heavy. Someone gasped. Another froze, wide-eyed. Jasmine was at the far end of the range. She didn't hesitate. While others looked around in confusion, she moved. No shouting, no panic, just swift action. She reached the injured recruit in seconds and dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands were steady. She applied pressure just below the wound to control the bleeding, then opened her field kit. The cut was deep. It would need stitches later, but right now, it needed control. "Someone call the medic," a recruit shouted. "I've got it," Jasmine said, not raising her voice. She stayed calm and worked quickly. She wrapped gauze around the injury, applied direct pressure to the artery, and braced his shoulder to prevent further movement. Within minutes, the bleeding had slowed. She gave the young man water and monitored his pulse until the camp's medical officer arrived. When the staff took over, Jasmine stood up without a word and walked back toward the equipment bench. No one clapped. No one said thank you. A few of the recruits looked at her differently, but only for a moment. Most went back to their drills. They didn't ask where she had learned to do that. They assumed she was just very well trained in first aid. Nothing more. Sergeant Doug Simmons had been watching the whole time. He was standing near the command shed, arms crossed, chewing gum like he had nowhere better to be. He didn't look impressed. Later that afternoon, as Jasmine was wiping down a training table, he walked by with a smirk. "Nice job out there, Nurse Know-It-All," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "Didn't even scream when you saw blood." She didn't respond. That night, Simmons used the nickname again in front of the recruits. "Hey, Nurse Know-It-All," he barked. "We need those rifles cleaned again." And the next morning, "Nurse Know-It-All. Think you can handle restocking the medical supplies, or should we call someone more experienced?" The comments weren't jokes. They were meant to embarrass her. Jasmine never showed any reaction. She simply nodded and carried out every task. To most people, she looked like she didn't care. But a few of the older instructors started to notice something. She didn't just clean rifles. She disassembled and reassembled them faster than most of the trainees. She inspected every part, ran cloth through every barrel, adjusted the optics, and made sure nothing was out of line. She didn't just restock supplies. She took full inventory. She tracked expiration dates, reordered efficiently, and rearranged the shelves for faster access during emergencies. She did all of it with the accuracy of someone who had done this in real conditions, under pressure. And still, she said nothing about her background. At night, after the other trainees had gone to their bunks, Jasmine stayed in the medical bay. She sat alone, cleaning equipment and prepping bags. The overhead lights buzzed quietly. No music, no distractions. On her left wrist was the same old military watch she wore every day. The strap was faded and the glass was scratched, but she never took it off. Sometimes, she would pause and press her thumb gently against the face of it. Just once. Then she'd go back to work. The night after the shooting incident, she was wiping down a table when she reached for the watch again. This time she held it a little longer. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her shoulders stiffened, just slightly, like she was remembering something she hadn't let herself think about in a long time. In that moment, it was clear this wasn't just a woman doing a support job. Jasmine Carter had seen real emergencies. She had been trained far beyond what anyone here could imagine. She didn't correct them. She didn't argue. She simply waited. Because deep down, she knew something the rest of them didn't. The day would come when someone would need her to do more than clean rifles. And when that happened, they'd stop calling her Nurse Know-It-All. They'd call her by her name. It was just after lunch when the incident happened. The sun was high, and dry wind was sweeping dust across the Ridgewell shooting range. The afternoon training rotation had just begun. A row of recruits took their positions, preparing for marksmanship drills at 100 yards, using the standard MUF-4 training rifles. One of the newer recruits, a tall, skinny young man who had barely been at camp for 2 weeks, was visibly nervous. He had fumbled through the safety checks earlier in the day, and now he stood rigid, holding his rifle too high and too close to his shoulder. A few recruits watched from behind, already whispering. "Watch this," one said quietly. "He's going to knock himself out." He did worse. The recruit squeezed the trigger. The shot missed. The recoil caught him off guard. The buttstock slammed into the top of his right arm, and the barrel jerked back, clipping his collarbone. The rifle dropped to the ground, and the recruit cried out. Blood began pouring from a long, open tear across his shoulder, fast and heavy. Everyone around him froze. Some turned their heads, others backed up instinctively, unsure of what to do. For several seconds, no one moved. Then someone shouted, "Medic!" Jasmine Carter was already moving. She had been stationed at the far end of the range, assisting with equipment checks. The moment she saw the weapon kick back and the recruit fall, she crossed the dirt lot at a brisk, controlled pace. No shouting, no panic. She knelt down next to the injured recruit, who was struggling to breathe through the shock. "I need you to stay still," she said clearly. "I've got you." Her hands were steady. She cut open the sleeve with a pocket knife from her belt. The wound was jagged and bleeding heavily. She immediately applied firm pressure to the artery below the injury point, slowing the blood flow. With her other hand, she pulled gauze from her field kit and began dressing the wound. The recruits around her said nothing. A few stepped closer but didn't interfere. Within minutes, Jasmine had wrapped the wound, reinforced the dressing with tape, and stabilized the recruit's arm to minimize movement. His breathing had slowed, and his face, while still pale, looked less panicked. A staff medic arrived and took over. Jasmine gave a clear, quick report on what she had done, then stood up and stepped away. She didn't wait for thanks. No one offered any. The recruits around her looked confused. One whispered, "Where the hell did she learn that?" No one answered. No one asked her directly. Most assumed she had taken a few advanced first aid courses. Jasmine walked back toward the storage shed where she had left her toolkit. Her face didn't change expression, her pace never broke. From a few yards away, Sergeant Doug Simmons had watched the entire event. Arms crossed, sunglasses on, leaning against a post like he was waiting for a coffee break. Later that afternoon, while Jasmine was organizing the cleaning tools at the back of the workshop, Simmons passed by. He didn't say, "Good job." He didn't ask about the recruit. Instead, he said, "Not bad. Nurse know it." Or, "You didn't even flinch." He said it loud enough for a few others to hear. Jasmine didn't respond. She continued sorting brushes and bore snakes by size and condition. The nickname stuck. The mockery continues. The next day, during roll call before morning drills, Simmons used it again. "Hey, nurse know it. All, we need those rifles cleaned before noon. Think you can handle that?" That evening, he added another. "Nurse know. It, all. We're short on cold packs. You think you can manage inventory, or should we get someone with a clipboard?" It didn't stop there. He made it routine calling her out in front of trainees, mocking her in subtle but public ways, always with that same smirk, always loud enough for others to catch it. Jasmine never responded. Not once. She never asked anyone to intervene. She never went to the office. She didn't argue or avoid him. She simply nodded and did what was assigned. To many, she seemed indifferent. Some newer recruits thought she might not even notice the way she was being treated. But a few of the more experienced staff started to notice something different. Jasmine didn't just perform her duties well. She did them with accuracy and discipline few others showed. When she cleaned the rifles, she didn't just wipe down the barrels. She stripped the weapons down to their core components. She checked the firing pins, trigger assemblies, buffer springs and scopes. She logged irregularities and replaced damaged parts without needing to be told. When she restocked medical supplies, she didn't just refill what was missing. She rotated items for expiration dates, cleaned the cabinets, labeled drawers, and logged every order into a spreadsheet she built herself. Even the camp's assigned medic began relying on her logs during inspections. None of that changed how Sergeant Simmons spoke to her. But over time, some of the recruits started to pay closer attention. A few stopped laughing when he made jokes at her expense. A few even began coming to her quietly in the evenings to ask questions to stabilize a wrist, how to clean a clogged barrel, how to prep a sling for a shoulder sprain. She answered every question calmly and clearly. She never raised her voice, never rushed. After lights out, when the building was quiet and the rest of the camp settled in, Jasmine often stayed in the medical bay, alone. She disinfected counters, reorganized drawers, and rechecked her supply logs. The overhead light buzzed softly. She worked without music, without company. On her wrist was the same old military watch, faded canvas band, scratched glass. And sometimes just for a second she would stop what she was doing, rest her thumb on the face of that watch, and stay like that, silent, still. She never talked about it. But that watch wasn't for telling time. It was a reminder of something. And whatever it meant to her, it gave her enough reason to return every morning, ignore every comment, and continue doing the work no one else wanted to do, without complaint, without recognition. Not everyone understood her. But she wasn't waiting to be understood. She was waiting for something else. And soon, the entire camp would find out what that was. It was a Friday morning when the announcement came. Sergeant Doug Simmons stood in front of the dining hall at 700, holding a clipboard in one hand and a mug of coffee in the other. His voice carried over the courtyard. "Tomorrow afternoon, we're holding a marksmanship challenge," he said, "mandatory for all active trainees and support staff." There were a few laughs from the back, a couple of groans. Someone called out, "Even the kitchen crew?" Simmons grinned. "That's right. If you're here and breathing, you're shooting." It was supposed to be for morale adjust, a fun activity to break up the week. The targets would be set at 300 meters, and everyone would get one shot using a camp-issued M24 sniper rifle. The winner got a steak dinner, front-of-the-line privileges for a week, and their name posted on the board. Most people took it lightly. The veterans joked about it. The younger ones started placing bets. No one expected anything from Jasmine Carter. She didn't sign up. She didn't speak during the briefing. She simply stood at the edge of the crowd, listening, and then returned to the supply shed to finish her inventory checks. But Simmons didn't forget her. The next day, just before the challenge began, he made sure everyone was watching. A folding table had been set up near the firing line. One of the instructors laid out the M24, clean and gleaming in the sunlight, with a fresh round beside it. Simmons called out names in groups of 3, and one by one, the recruits took their shots. Some hit the target board. A few missed entirely. One trainee hit the outer ring and earned a round of applause. Then, Simmons looked toward the back of the crowd. Jasmine was standing there, hands behind her back, wearing her camp-issued windbreaker and boots. "Come on, Nurse Know-It-All," he called out, raising his voice. "Let's see what you can do with a real weapon." There was laughter. Someone near the front said, "Is she even allowed to shoot that? She probably thinks the scope is a thermometer." Another joked. Jasmine didn't say a word. She stepped forward, calmly, and approached the rifle. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look nervous. She picked it up, checked the chamber, inspected the scope alignment, and adjusted the bipod. Then she lowered herself to the ground, into a prone position. The crowd quieted a little. The way she handled the riflate didn't look like guesswork. It looked practiced. At the other end of the field, the target stood still at exactly 300 meters. A stiff wind was blowing from the west. Simmons smirked and crossed his arms. Jasmine exhaled, then adjusted the angle of her shoulder. She set her cheek to the stock and closed one eye. No movement. No delay. She pulled the trigger. The sound cracked across the range. Several heads turned. Some of the instructors looked through the spotting scope set beside the range table. For a moment, there was silence. Then one of them spoke. "Bullseye." The crowd murmured. A few recruits leaned in toward the scope. "Dead center," someone else said. "Not just on the target. She drilled the exact middle." Simmons stepped forward with a skeptical look on his face. He picked up the scope and peered through it. Then he lowered it, slowly. "She got lucky," he said. But not everyone agreed. An older man standing a few feet behind the range stepped closer. He wore no rank on his sleeves, but several of the staff recognized him as Harold Green, a retired instructor who visited Ridgewell from time to time. Green stared at Jasmine, still lying in position. Then he said quietly, "That shooting stance. That's Franklin Carter's technique." The crowd turned. Harold Green continued, more certain now. The shoulder drop, the breath hold, the way she steadied the rifle before recoil. That's how he taught us in 3. No one else shoots like that anymore. Jasmine rose to her feet, cleared the chamber, and placed the rifle back on the table without a word. Then she stepped aside and returned to her spot at the back of the group. She didn't explain anything. She didn't correct anyone. But the tone around the field had changed. The recruits who had laughed were now whispering to each other, trying to remember if she'd ever mentioned prior service. The instructors stood still, unsure of what to say. Even Simmons said nothing for the rest of the day. She didn't claim the prize. She returned to work without a word. But the silence left behind by that shot stayed with everyone who saw it. 3 days after the shooting competition, the camp was notified of a high-level simulation scheduled for that week. It was part of Ridgewell's annual tactical readiness test. Every year, instructors staged a surprise scenario designed to push both trainees and staff under pressure. This year's simulation involved a mock hostile sniper team approaching from the outer perimeter. The goal was to test base security, response times, and coordination under stress. The rounds used were paint-based, non-lethal, but capable of causing real bruises or injury if fired at close range. The camp received the alert just after 2:00 p.m. Sirens sounded. A voice came over the intercom, ordering all personnel to report to underground shelters. The protocol was standard: evacuate, seal off, then evaluate response tactics from a control center. Within 15 minutes, most staff and trainees had made it to the safety zones. But as the evacuation completed, a report came through. A small group of new recruits had been left behind. They were still inside the East Storage Building near the training perimeter. Communications were down in that area. The mock sniper, team playing the role of the enemy, was moving toward that exact structure. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The simulation wasn't meant to get that close. But the clock was ticking, and the recruits were unarmed and unaware. The instructors debated what to do. The tactical response team was already in position, but getting them to the east end would take at least 20 minutes. The mock snipers would reach the building in under 10. If the recruits were caught by surprise, even in a simulation, injuries were likely. Down in the shelter, Jasmine Carter listened silently. She had been organizing supplies when the alarm sounded and followed instructions like everyone else. But now, she stood near the back wall, arms crossed, eyes locked on the layout map pinned beside the exit door. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't explain herself. While the officers argued about timing and chain of command, Jasmine slipped away from the shelter, took a side corridor, and headed for the armory. The M24 sniper rifle from the marksmanship event was still in its case. She checked the barrel, chamber, and scope quickly. Everything was in order. She took one extra round, then made her way toward the administration building. It was the tallest structure on the base, built with reinforced concrete and located on the west side, directly across from the eastern storage zone. Jasmine climbed the stairs to the second floor. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She reached the top landing, pushed open a window that faced the perimeter, and set up. From there, she had a clear, elevated view of the eastern field. The wind was strong, around 15 miles per hour, coming from the northwest. She estimated the distance from her position to the target zone at 875 yards, or just under 800 meters. The shot wouldn't be easy. It would require precise adjustment for both elevation and wind drift. Through her scope, she spotted movement 3 figures in full tactical gear, moving in formation toward the east building. Jasmine adjusted the bipod height, checked her breathing, and sighted in. The paint-based simulation rounds used sensors embedded in the gear. A hit to the center chest sensor would disable the opposing player immediately and trigger an eliminated signal. She focused on the lead figure. Her breathing slowed. She exhaled halfway and held. The trigger pull was clean. The rifle kicked once. Through the scope, she watched the sensor on the lead mock sniper's vest blink red. Within moments, the simulation alarm system picked up the signal. "All clear," the voice announced over the camp's PA system. "Threat neutralized. Simulation complete. All personnel secure." Down at the base of the building, 2 officers looked up, confused. They had traced the shot back to Jasmine's position. Moments later, they radioed it in. A few minutes passed. Then Colonel Benjamin Cole entered the administration building. He found Jasmine in the same spot where she had fired the shot. She had already cleared the rifle, set it down, and was kneeling beside her pack. She didn't rise until he was standing in front of her. The colonel didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. "I knew this day would come," he said. Jasmine looked at him, but didn't answer. "Your father told me," Cole continued. "He said you wouldn't come forward for glory or attention, only when someone else needed protection." Jasmine gave a single nod. The colonel straightened and offered a formal salute. She returned it. By the time she came back down to ground level, the news had already spread. Word moved fast through Ridgewell. The woman they'd called Nurse Know-It-All had just ended the simulation with one shot clean, accurate, and exactly on time. She had done it before the command had even mobilized. But Jasmine didn't talk about it. She returned the rifle to the armory, logged it back in, and walked quietly to the medical bay. There was still work to do. Colonel Benjamin Cole stood at the second-floor window for a moment before entering. Through the glass, he had watched Jasmine Carter neutralize a simulated sniper threat with a single shot from 800 meters away. Now, he was standing across from her. No noise, no crowd, just the two of them in the top floor of the administration building. Jasmine stood by the rifle case, silent. She had already cleared the weapon, packed up her equipment, and was preparing to return to the shelter when the colonel approached. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't question her actions. He simply came to attention and offered a formal salute. "Your father said this day would come," he said. Jasmine returned the salute, then stood at ease. Colonel Cole continued. "He told me you wouldn't step forward for attention. He said when the right moment came, you'd act, and that when you did, people would finally understand." He looked directly at her. "I understand now." She didn't respond, but her posture softened slightly. She nodded once. By the time they exited the building, word had already spread throughout Ridgewell. The officers at the simulation control had confirmed that Jasmine's single shot had ended the entire exercise. The signal had come from the administration building, and only one person had been up there. It didn't take long for the rest of the camp to connect the dots. She wasn't just the quiet medical assistant. She wasn't just someone who had taken a few first aid classes and knew how to clean rifles. She was Jasmine Carter, daughter of Major Franklin Carter, the legendary marksman whose name still held weight in military circles years after his retirement and passing. And more than that, she had just proven herself capable of matching his reputation with her own skill. The recruits began whispering first. Then instructors started confirming it. Within an hour, the name Nurse Know-It-All disappeared from daily conversation. Now, they just call her by her name. The offers that followed. The next morning, representatives from 3 different special operations units arrived at Ridgewell. They weren't there for the scheduled training review. They were there because they had heard about what happened the day before. One team offered her a commission into their sharpshooter development program. Another offered fast-track re-entry into active military duty with a specialized role in forward observation. The third offered a private sector position in tactical training with a signing bonus and relocation package. All 3 gave her time to consider. She met with Colonel Cole in his office later that afternoon. He had all the details printed out, and he slid the folders across the desk to her. "You've earned the right to choose," he said. "They'll take you back with full honors. You'll have rank, benefits, the best equipment, everything." Jasmine sat quietly. She opened the folders, looked over the paperwork, then closed them again. "I appreciate the offers," she said. "But I'm not here to be a weapon. I'm here to help people heal." The colonel nodded. He didn't argue. "You'll always have a place if you change your mind," he said. She thanked him, then left the office and returned to the medical bay. A new kind of respect. That evening, something changed at Ridgewell. The trainees who used to avoid Jasmine mock her started stopping by the supply room. Not to gossip, not to gawk, but to ask questions. "Can you show me how you check a rifle scope? How do you control your breathing when you shoot? I've been struggling with trigger control, would you watch me?" She never set up formal classes. She didn't request a title. But every day after drills, a small group gathered around her during cleanup. She'd demonstrate grip adjustments using training rifles. She taught wound wrapping techniques with the same quiet patience she always had. She listened carefully. She spoke plainly. And they listened to her. The instructors noticed too. More than once, Sergeant Simmons passed by but said nothing. He didn't use the nickname again. Not once. By the end of the week, recruits had started calling her something new, Coach Jasmine. The name started as a quiet gesture of respect. Within days, it stuck. She didn't ask for that either, but this time, she didn't mind hearing it. 2 weeks after the simulation, Colonel Benjamin Cole found Jasmine in the medical bay. She was cleaning instruments as usual, alone, just past 1,900 hours. He didn't knock, just stepped inside and waited until she looked up. He handed her a sealed envelope. The paper was yellowed at the edges. The handwriting was familiar. "Your father left this with me before he passed," the colonel said. "He asked me to give it to you only when the time was right." Jasmine took the letter without speaking. She sat down at the small desk in the corner and opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. Cassie, if you're reading this, it means you've used your skills when they truly mattered. Not to impress anyone, not to win medals, but because someone needed you, and you were there. That's what I trained you for. You didn't just keep your promise to me, you kept your promise to yourself. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Always. Dad. She read the letter twice. Then she sat still for a long time. And finally, quietly, she smiled. It was the first time anyone at Ridgewell had seen her do that. She folded the letter and tucked it away. Then she placed her hand gently over the face of her old watch. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. Because her father had been right all along. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to stand in front of a crowd. You just have to do the right thing, at the right time, for the right reason. And that's exactly what Jasmine Carter did. If you've made it to the end of Jasmine Carter's story, thank you for spending this time with us. We know your time is valuable, and we're honored to share these meaningful moments with you. In life, it's easy to believe that only loud voices or high positions carry value. But Jasmine's story reminds us of something deeper, that quiet strength, patience, and doing the right thing when no one is watching can leave the strongest legacy. You don't need recognition to make a difference. Sometimes, simply showing up, doing your work with care, and staying true to your principles is enough to change the lives around you. Many older adults carry stories, skills, and wisdom built over decades. You may not seek the spotlight, but your actions done with quiet integrity still shape the world. Whether it's guiding a grandchild, helping a neighbor, or sharing what you've learned, your legacy is already unfolding. Like Jasmine, you don't need applause to know your worth. What matters most isn't being remembered by many, but being there when it counts for the few who truly need you. And often, that's more than enough. You don't have to speak loudly to be heard. You just have to do the right thing at the right time with heart. That's the kind of strength that never fades. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share stories that honor dignity, resilience, and the quiet heroes among us. And don't miss our next video. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love. Stay strong, stay kind, and may peace be with you always.